Next up is our storyteller, our spell weaver. Mr. Connie Fisher has been telling stories for many, many years, and I have been a traveler on many trips brought to me by his tales. I give you Mr. Connie Fisher.
Now, in the 1930s in Sand Springs, Oklahoma, over the radio you could hear Jack Armstrong, the all-American boy, who each weeknight, but for after school and before supper time, he could meet all kind of ne'er-do-wells and other types of people that you're not too happy to be with, and he could set all things right before supper time. Now, in those days, when he could not set things right in that time frame, he just had everything stop and he'd take care of it the next afternoon. Just a typical teenager of 1930. But when I was really surprised to find out that he really wasn't Jack Armstrong, the all-American boy, he was Jock Armstrong. And the way I heard it was this, that back in that island that England and Scotland share, there was a time when the clans would get together because everybody knew that when Queen Elizabeth died, James the First would become James the Sixth would become James the First of England. And so the Scottish and the English chiefs of marches would have called by the king and the queen, by James the First, or Elizabeth or James, whichever you go by seniority. But they would hold these marches and meetings. Well, one of those was called, and they had this gathering. Now, Kinmont Willie was going to, Armstrong was to go, and his son, who had just celebrated his 11th birthday the week before, wanted to go with him. And he told him that if you'll not cry if things get rough and not be hollering about food and drink, he said, I'll take you along. But it's a man's thing, and the son wanted to go. So they went, and they had the gathering on the border, and things had happened a little sooner than expected, and they had about 3 days left when they broke apart. And the little boy, Jock, said he would like to see more of England. And Kinmont Willie said, well, you should. He said, let's look around a little bit. Said, I can take you to a high hill over here, and we can see the castle over there. Said, it's a beautiful castle, and said, you'd like to see it. So they were out riding, and while they were looking over, and they could see the castle down there, the English castle, and they saw a large bunch of men on horseback, and the boy pointed it out, and the father said, I've seen them. And he said, well, who do you think it is? And he says, I know who it is. It's Sikel, one of Scroope's lieutenants. Said, I don't want to meet him. Said, we have 3 days on the truce. Everything should be all right, but I don't want to raise curiosity. Let's start for home. But Jock's little horse could not make no time, and it wasn't long before they were surrounded by 200 Englishmen. And Sikel said, Kinmont Willie, who would have thought you'd been in English soil without an escort? But I will provide the escort. We'll take you to the castle until we take you to Harrowby. And when Jock heard the word Harrowby, he knew that's where they hanged people. So his heart was jumped into his throat, and he said, it's truce! And the man laughed, and he said, truce? And he said, well, I won't break his neck and the truce on the same day. He'll have 3 days, two nights, and 3 days. And Kinmont said, well, can I talk to my son, or do you make war on barons too? And Sikel said, let him talk to his son. So the Jock got off his little horse, and he climbed up on Big White Charlie, his father's steed, and he hugged his father, and his father whispered in his ears. He said, tell Backlock, that's my only hope. Backlock was the Scottish chief of marches. And so the boy was set down, and the father was taken off, and he had his horse. The evening was coming on. So he unsaddled the horse, and he let him graze around. He took the bannocks and some cheese and some water, and he said down that food goes down heavy and hard when you've got a heavy heart. And he let the horse till the sun was down, then he saddled him and he took him and he rode until he came to a stream. He did not know the way to the Lord of the Marches. So he found the stream, and he was hoping that he was going in the right direction and hoping to find the right house. He was following the stream, and he saw one small cottage. He left the horse at a little distance back, and he looked up in the window and he saw one little woman and a dog at the fireplace. He knocked on the door, and the woman answered the door. Her name was Allison Elliott, by the way. But she said, "Who's there?" And he said, "Jock Willie Armstrong." And she said, "I ken Mont Willie, I don't know any Jock." And he said, "That's my father." He said, "Well, he's a friend of mine." So she opened the door, let the boy in, and he told her the story. And she said, "Well, it's a while till the moon comes up, bright enough for you to ride. Take a nap, I'll take care of your horse." And she gave him a little food. And then he slept by the fire by the dog, and she fed the horse. And when the moon was up, Jock was taken to the horse, and she told him the directions, and he set off with the bright moon. And in the pride of the morning, he saw Branksome Castle, a big square thing with 4 towers on the one side and windows along the tops. And that was the Lord of the Marches places, the steward there. And so he tried to hurry his little horse up, but the horse was too lame, couldn't make it. So he left the horse, and he went himself, and he knocked on the door, and he banged. And the door opened, and a man came, and he said, "I'm Jock Armstrong, and I bear a message from Ken Mont Willie." And the steward let him in, and he came in and saw a big hall full of men, as if they were getting ready for a hunt, and they were drinking and laughing. And the steward walked forward, and the boy right behind him. He stood before the back log, and he said, he tapped the floor twice, and back log, the steward there said, "Your message," and he stepped aside, and he said, "I'm emissary from Ken Mont Willie of Armstrong." And the book said, "Does Ken Mont Willie have so few men he sends a baron with his messages?" And Jock was very disturbed by this, and he stood straight, and he said, "My father has many and good men, but I'm his son, and I've come to report that the English have taken him captive in time of truce." And the backline's hand hit the table near him so hard that the wine in the take glass went straight in the air. And then he began to order me about. And the lad was taken aside, taken to bed, given something to eat, and things started happening. And when Jock woke up, all the men were gathered with their arms and everything around. There was the Scot of Harden, there was the Scot of Goalie Lance, there was the Scot of Common Sack. What do you get it? There was a lot of Scots there. And so he said, "Lad, will you go with us, or are you too tired?" He said, "If my horse can go, I can go." And he said, "The horse cannot walk." And he said, "Red Rowan, pick him up and take him with you." So Red Rowan picked him up and threw him on the saddle, and he wrapped his big tartan about the two, and he said, "Lad, don't be disturbed. We cannot wait for you." He said, "We have to be going in a hurry, and you'll be best riding with me." And so they took off, and then they came to the Eden River. It was swollen, but they went right in and across. It was raining and lightning and thundering, which was a problem as far as travel, but was a blessing as far as being heard by the enemy. They came to the castle. Now 10 men, all they were really carrying, besides their own personal arms, were ladders. But those ladders were too short. And he said, "No problem." There were 10 men with horns and bells and racket makers and all kinds of things. And there were 10 that were there dressed for battle. So they looked for a light place in the wall, the unguarded spot. They broke it through for enough hold for Jock Armstrong to get through, and he opened the gate. Then the backlog said, "Kill no man if you can help it, only to save your own life. We didn't come to kill, but to save." And they caught the guards as they came around, tied them up, put clods in their mouth to keep them quiet. Then they knew where the jail was, where the dungeon was. They broke it in, They got down quietly as they could, and then when it was time to break through the cell, all the noisemakers began to make noise. And instead of opening doors, all the people in the castle locked their doors because it sounded like all Scotland was there. And they were making noises and everything. And then they went in, and Kinmont Willie was tied and chained to the wall. There wasn't time to get him loose from the chains. They just pulled the chain out of the wall, and 2 men carried him. And as they went back down the hall, he hollered down the hall, "Scroopy, when you get to Scotland, look me up. We'll host you some night." And then they were out at their side. They got him out, and they got the chains and things off and onto the horses, and then they were heading for the river. But before they would, by this time, the courage of the English were up. They were up, and the horns and the things were sounding, and messages had been sent to the community. And so the town people themselves, the men in the town as well as the castle, had all gathered up, and they knew the land, and they were at the crossing. They were at the ford before the Scots. And maybe there were 1,000 there by this time, 60 against 1,000, 30 against 1,000. And so there was no hesitation that on the Eden River was at flood, but they went straight across and into the water and up the other side. And Jock hollered across, "Come visit us in Scotland sometime. We'll give you a rousing welcome." And then they heard the laughter of the Scots as they rolled off with the English waiting. Now, if you're still interested in this, remember, next week it's Jack Armstrong, the all-American boy. Eat Wheaties. Thank you.